Welcome everyone to the Diary of a Cameraman. Today we'll be looking at an introduction to Adobe Photoshop. Okay, let me open my Adobe Photoshop. This is my display. Let me go to a folder. Let me just open an image. Okay, let me open my Adobe Photoshop. Adobe Photoshop 2023. Adobe Photoshop has been in existence for more than 10 years in the Adobe industry. It's used for photo editing, retouching, graphics design, and so on. So this is the interface of Adobe Photoshop. Okay, here let me just open a particular image in the system already. I've clicked that image. So this is Adobe Photoshop 2023 version of Adobe Photoshop. So I'm gonna make you understand what Adobe Photoshop is all about and its importance. Adobe Photoshop is one of the amazing Adobe software which performs varieties of functions. But in this channel, the Diary of a Cameraman, we will look at using Adobe Photoshop for photo retouching. Like I told you, Adobe Photoshop performs multiple functions. It's used for photo retouching, it's used for graphic design, it's used for a lot of things. It's used for banner creation, for 3D designs. But our main concern in everything that has to do with Adobe Photoshop is also used for designing of different things. Our main concern will be photo retouching with Adobe Photoshop. Every photo retoucher out there makes use of Adobe Photoshop to retouch all the amazing images you see. Like on my screen, you can see some amazing image. Okay, these are some amazing image. All these we are actually retouched. All this we are actually retouched in Adobe Photoshop. As you can see, all these amazing images we are all retouched, edited in Adobe Photoshop, which is an amazing photo retouching software. So it has been there for more than 20 years. Before we dive into understanding the interface of Adobe Photoshop, I want to make us understand the importance of Adobe Photoshop. Adobe Photoshop has a great and numerous importance to the public since its creation by the Adobe industry. First of all, is used for photo retouching. It makes photo retouching process easy and amazing to carry out. Adobe Photoshop is also used for graphic designs. 80% of graphic designers in the industry currently now make use of Adobe Photoshop. We also have CorelDRAW, but they also make use of Adobe Photoshop because of the features and the easy interface that was created by Adobe Photoshop over the years. Adobe Photoshop is also used for creating of banners, flyers, designing of banners. Adobe Photoshop is also used for designing of banners, flyers, billboard, and etc. All these are done with Adobe Photoshop. Adobe Photoshop is also used for typing of text. A lot of people prefer using Microsoft packages like Microsoft Word to type text, but you can actually type a text with Adobe Photoshop depending on the way you want to do it. Maybe a PDF text or an image text. Not an image text you want to have in your phone, maybe of your brand, what your brand is all about. You can type it in Adobe Photoshop and save it as a PDF file or save it as a document that you can have in your phone every time to know what your brand is all about in an image form. So that's another thing Adobe Photoshop does. It's very important for you to know that. So today, in using Adobe Photoshop for photo retouching, I'll be making us understand how to import raw file and JPEG file in Adobe Photoshop. So let me close back my Photoshop. This is an image here. Okay, this is actually an image, actually a picture. So this is a JPEG picture. How will I know it's a JPEG picture? I clicked it and I go to my properties. Going to my properties, you see it here, JPEG file, type of file, JPEG file. So this is actually a JPEG picture. We have a JPEG picture and we have a raw picture when it comes to the photography industry. So in subsequent tutorial, I'll make us understand the difference between raw and JPEG file. I click open with Adobe Photoshop. Takes a while for it to actually open, and here it is an open. Finally, zoom in and zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. So I make it smaller, I make it bigger. Now this is a raw file, a raw image file open in Adobe Photoshop. So I'll now click open, and here it has open. So now let me open a JPEG file. So if I click this image and go to properties, this is type of file, JPG file. So this is actually a JPEG file. So I click on it and I say open with Adobe Photoshop. It opens directly to the interface of my Photoshop. Now, what's the difference between this and that, which we'll discuss in our next tutorial? But today I'll make us understand some basic features in Adobe Photoshop. By the left-hand side of my screen is a different toolbars in Adobe Photoshop. If I click here, you see move tool, you see artboard tool. Here we have our rectangular marquee tool, our elliptical marquee tool. Here we have our lasso tool, we have our polygonal lasso tool, we have our magnetic tool. Here we have our object selection tool, we have our quick selection tool, we have our magic word tool. Here we have our crop tool, and we have our perspective crop tool. Here we have our eyedropper tool, we have our colors sampler tool. Then over here we have our spot healing brush tool. Over here we have our healing brush tool. Over here we have our patch tool. Over here we have our content aware move tool. Right clicking here we have our brush tool and our pencil tool. Then right clicking here we have our close stamp tool and we have our pattern stamp tool. Right clicking here we have our history brush tool. We have our art history brush tool. Right clicking here we have our eraser tool. We have our background eraser tool. We have our magic eraser tool. Then over here, since there is no cursor on the down, over here we have our gradient tool. Right clicking here we have our blur tool and we have our smash tool. Over here we have our sharpen tool. Right clicking here we have our dodge tool, our bond tool, our sponge tool. Right clicking here we have our horizontal type tool, our vertical type tool. Right clicking here we have our pen tool. we have our transform pen tool, our freeform pen tool, we have our add anchor point tool, we have our delete anchor point tool, we have our convert point tool. Then right clicking here, we have our selection tool and we have our direct selection tool. Right clicking here, we have our hand tool, we have our rotate view tool. Then here is our zoom tool. Then this is a 3 dot here. If you click here, if you right click here, you will see different types of tools that are still here, which is our single column marking tool, we have our single row marking tool, we have our slice select tool, we have our slice tool, we have our 3D material eyedropper tool, we have our ruler tool, we have our note tool, we have our count tool, we have our red eye tool, we have our color replacement tool, we have our mixer brush tool, we have our paint bucket tool, we have our 3D material drop tool, we have our horizontal type marks tool, we have our vertical type marks tool, we have our rectangular tool, we have our ellipse tool, we have our polygon tool, we have our line tool, we have our custom shape tool, we have our frame tool, we have our curvature pen tool, we have our triangle tool, and we have our remove tool. These are all the tools in Adobe Photoshop. There are more than 20 tools in Adobe Photoshop, and these tools performs varieties of functions attributed to Adobe Photoshop. And we are going to discuss all the functions of the tools and what it can be used for to have a perfect image, creation or photo retouching as a retoucher using Adobe Photoshop. Then up here we have our menu bars. Here we have our file menu bar, which is made up of our new, our open, our browsing bridge, our open, and so on, different write-ups here. Then we have our edit menu bar. Then we have our image menu bar. We have our layer menu bar. We have our type menu bar. We have our select menu bar. We have our filter menu bar. We have our 3D menu bar. We have our view menu bar. We have our plugin menu bar. We have our window menu bar. And we have our help menu bar, which we'll also discuss in detail with each of the functions. Then here is our layer panel. Here, if you create a new layer like Ctrl J, a new layer, which will make us understand what is a layer in Adobe Photoshop and the functions of a layer. You see a new layer has been created here where you work on your project. This is our layer panel. Then here is our adjustment panel. All the adjustment layers in Adobe Photoshop are found in this panel. Then here you can also get adjustment panel here, the adjustment layers here. Then here is this is our create a new group layer. Here is our create new layer, and here is our maxing layer. This is our delete tab, and so on. So these are the different. Then here is our different plugins in Adobe Photoshop, where it is found the ultimate retouch and the beauty retouch are the two we are using, and so on. So we'll be discussing in details what this is all about and its functions to Adobe Photoshop. So this is the introduction to Adobe Photoshop, importing of JPEG and raw image to Adobe Photoshop, and the different interfaces that makes up Adobe Photoshop. Then different interfaces that makes up Adobe Photoshop. In our next tutorial, I'll be making us understand the difference between the raw footage and the JPEG footage in the world of photography, and also working with it in Adobe Photoshop. See you next time, Darafik Cameraman. Thank you.